And it's time now for American Scream.
The Fall of Perryville.
I had just made it to the yellow lines in the middle of the road, and there, lying in between the lines, was my next meal. He looked like a novelty with his arms raised toward the sky and his eyes popping out of their sockets. The only part of him that lacked any humor was his lower half, that had been rolled flat onto the road. I continued to look into his bursting yellow eyes and reflect on his obscene passing until the sounds from a rather loud vehicle in the distance told me I was next. I peeled him off the ground and soon found my way under a park bench where I began to tear away at the creature's fur. As I got into the sweeter part of the meat, I noticed a structure in the distance. It was a large rectangular sign, but the wall of rain in front of me made it impossible to read. It encouraged me, however, and when I finished consuming every part of the animal, I ventured toward it. When I approached, I discovered the sign read Perryville in large curving letters. Underneath, in smaller letters, it related that it was a housing development established in 2009. My eyes then found the black, unmarked road behind it, and I followed the path as it guided me through a tunnel of pines that sheltered me from the rain. As I came around the bend, I was greeted with rows of modern homes. Most of them looked identical to each other, with only a few of them taking on different designs. I ran underneath the first roof I could and shook myself dry, using the soft fabrics left out on their decorative benches to absorb most of the water. After this, I tried scratching at the door and whining as loud as I could to get some attention. I turned around and began to head to the house across the street when a pair of yellow lights pulled into the driveway. My eyes caught sight of white hair and a frail old figure emptying grocery bags from the back seat of a tan car. The car door shut and a soft shuffling of shoes came nearer to me. "Hello. Where did you come from? You sure look like you haven't had a good meal in a while. How about I go get you something? How does that sound?" She went in and shut the door behind her. It didn't take long before she was back with a bowl of water and another bowl of something I could make out as beans with cubed meat scattered throughout. I lapped up the clear, thick water, unable to stop until it was gone, then inhaled the food mixture beside it. "You sure are hungry, aren't you?" "Oh, it's awful cold out here, isn't it? And you're very wet and dirty. Too bad you don't have any tags or I could call somebody. I think I should bring you in for a bit. It's freezing out here and, well, something tells me you haven't had a warm place to sleep in quite a while." It was all unfolding itself so perfectly. I finished the bean mixture and she took the bowls back up and led me inside. The warmth of the house covered me instantly. It was a real difference from the numbing coldness I've almost grown accustomed to. "All right, so first things first, we need to get you cleaned up." She started upstairs and called me up after her. We went into a small cream-colored room. It had black cabinets and marble floors so shiny I saw my reflection, as if it were a mirror. She started the water and gathered some old-looking towels and put them on the toilet near the tub. While she was facing toward it, I casually jumped into the water beside her. She turned to me and her eyes lit up. "Good boy! That's a really good boy! I thought I was going to have to drag you in there." I smiled at her. She turned around again and I jumped out, creating a rather long puddle of water that ran across the whole room while continuing to wring myself dry. "No! Ah! You were doing so good. See, now I have to clean all this up." She picked up one of the towels she had laid out and started to unfold it. I took this as my cue and grabbed onto the other end of it. I pulled it as hard as I could, realizing just how slick the floor had become as my feet were sliding out from under me. "Hey, okay, stop it. We're not playing." I was able to stabilize myself, and with this I gave a hard tug that overpowered her. She fell back and there was a loud, hollow bang as she hit her head on the side of the tub. She was lying on the floor, unconscious. The water from the tub was still running, getting near to the top of the brim. I I decided to act fast and drop the towel onto the soaked floor. I went over to the top of her head and opened my mouth around it. I felt my head begin to warp itself as my mouth stretched over her thin, wiry hair. This was a process that would have taken hours on an empty stomach. I was now about halfway over it, and I started to feel movement. She was waking up quicker than I expected.
What's happening? I can't see! I can't see!
She reached up and touched my fur, realizing her situation was worse than she previously thought. She started to scream uncontrollably while making an attempt to pull herself from my mouth. It was unsuccessful, and I continued to hold tight while sucking her head further into my throat. She tried to pull herself off the ground, but I slammed her back down. She tried again, and this time I shook her head left and right and up and down. My teeth were drawing closer to her neck, so close that I decided to force my way forward. The sensation of pins and needles filled the back of my throat, and I knew her neck was right under my teeth. At that moment, they became long and extruded themselves into blades. I bit down hard. Her torso fell onto the floor with a thud, and I felt the movement in her face freeze. The dark blood poured out of her neck like a fountain. It continued to form a pool around me as I started on her lower half. It wasn't long after that until I was standing on 2 feet again for the first time in what was now centuries. I opened the door to the bathroom and was met with the faintest light of day coming through the window in the foyer. I continued down the hallway to the left of me and entered the master suite, where I found some fresh clothes to wear. I sprayed a bit of perfume on before I made my way downstairs to watch the sunrise. It was around 8:30 when I heard the doorbell ring. I had fallen asleep on the reading chair in front of the living room window. I heard the doorbell ring again along with a series of enthusiastic knocks. How could I forget? Claire was supposed to come by for coffee today, and I hadn't even started on it. I got up from the chair and rushed to the door. I opened it and was greeted by the back of her long brown hair tied up in a frizzy ponytail. Her hands were on her waist and she was wearing a purple jumpsuit. Your hedges are looking a little long, Deirdre. You need my guy to come by and take care of that? She turned around and looked at me. Before I had a chance to speak, her eyes lit up, unable to contain her excitement. Oh my god! Did you get a facelift? No. What makes you say that? She looked at me inquisitively. Don't bullshit me, honey. I know you did something. Getting wrinkles to disappear doesn't just happen overnight. Okay, I admit it. I got a facelift. So what? So what? I want the name of your surgeon, Deirdre. I've been thinking about getting some things done, and this just confirmed it for me. She passed by me in the doorway and made her way into the kitchen. I closed the door and followed her. I'll give you his name before you leave. Sorry I didn't start the coffee. I was asleep on the couch before you rang. Don't worry about it, we've got time. My god, you got the works, didn't you? When did you go for all this? I only saw you last week. It was the day after we saw each other. I thought I could get away with it, but I guess the results are a bit drastic, aren't they? And no bandages? No bruising? Well, the bandages I only got off about a couple days ago, and apparently I'm not that big of a bruiser. So why did you do it? Not trying to get back in the dating game, are you? Oh, no. I just had some extra money lying around, and I figured I don't have any children to spend it on, so I might as well just spend it on myself. Well, you look like $1,000,000. We both laughed as the coffee machine hissed behind me. How's George? I asked. Oh, he's absolutely hopeless. Ever since he retired, he doesn't know what to do with himself anymore. 57 years he's worked for that same company, you know. Well, if I worked for a company that long, I'd probably feel a little lost too. She tilted her head and took a biscuit from the tin tray I just opened up for us. Yeah, I suppose it's normal. I'm just wondering how long it'll take him to get out of that funk is all. I heard the machine spit out the last few drops of coffee and went over to a cabinet to grab a couple of mugs. Coffee's ready. You want it black, right? She shook her head and swallowed a mouthful of biscuit before answering me. No, I feel like making it sweet today. Mind if I help myself? Not at all, I said, outstretching my hand to the fridge. The countertops were a lovely white granite that went well with the dark stain on the cabinets. Usually this stone is pretty strong, but I couldn't help but wonder its likelihood of cracking. I heard the clinking of her spoon as she stirred her coffee. I turned around and watched her take the first sip, almost in bliss. I've always found the act of someone drinking coffee to be better than the drink itself. Her eyes were shut, taking in the warmth and the taste of the bittersweetness. Her head hit the countertop more forcefully than I expected. The coffee she was holding made its way to the floor as I lifted her head back up. She was confused and seemed to have lost all sense of self. Again, her face met the stone, and again, and again, and again. I felt I could have thrown her straight through the front window, but I simply dropped her there on the kitchen floor. I proceeded to disrobe her body in my own. I discovered last night swallowing clothes wasn't the easiest thing to endure. I proceeded to open my mouth and repeat the process of devourment all over again. My mouth and head warped themselves around her. My body elongated and widened as I fit the rest of her in. I laid there on the floor, unable to move, and about a minute later I could feel her coming back up. My mouth stretched around her naked body as she emerged. Her head was restored to normal and her eyes were wide open, ready to take on the world. Claire left the room and went into the closet upstairs to find a change of clothes. She found a jumpsuit that was almost exactly like the one she had on before, only this one was black. She made her way back downstairs and left through the front door. The both of us saying nothing on her departure, but sharing everything.